instantaneous and overwhelming. As he ran, tears of frustration welled in Richard's eyes. He cursed the unfairness of the universe. He felt as though a higher power, and the rest of the world, were constantly conspiring to drag him down into misery. The pain of losing his ticket to an honest, secure future was a devastating blow to his spirit. When the morning sun finally rose, casting a warm, golden glow over the trailer park, the atmosphere in a different section of the community was starkly different. Inside a meticulously organized wooden shed, Bubbles was experiencing a profound personal renaissance. The air inside the shed was thick with the scent of roasted malt and floral hops. Bubbles stood proudly next to an array of shiny metal kettles and glass fermentation vessels. He had recently made a life-altering decision. He had sold his highly coveted, secret pizza sauce recipe to a peculiar investor with an unusual accent. Instead of squandering the profits, Bubbles had invested every single penny into building a legitimate business. He was brewing his own brand of craft beverage, a product he proudly named the Green Bastard India Pale Ale. Bubbles greeted his neighbors cheerfully as he worked. He marveled at his own success, noting that the business had started off slowly, but he was now earning a respectable income from his efforts. He pointed to the rows of neatly labeled bottles, explaining that he was selling a tremendous amount of his product to the residents of the park. The business was thriving. It was a refreshing change from his previous, exhausting attempts to make money through menial labor. However, Bubbles was feeling the weight of a demanding schedule. He explained that he was under an immense amount of pressure that particular day. Richard was preparing to make a major, mysterious announcement and had decided to host a massive celebration. Richard had placed an enormous order, requesting 22 large crates of the beverage. Bubbles deduced that Richard's news must be incredibly significant to warrant such a large purchase. Bubbles felt a surge of excitement and anticipation for his friend. Just then, Julian walked into the shed, accompanied by an older resident. Julian attempted to project his usual aura of effortless authority, but Bubbles could sense an underlying tension in his posture. Julian casually asked Bubbles how the brewing business was progressing. Bubbles, overflowing with pride, responded enthusiastically that it was an absolutely wonderful venture, far less demanding and much more rewarding than their past struggles. Julian, always looking for an angle, complimented the operation. He suggested that people genuinely seemed to enjoy the product. Then, Julian smoothly transitioned to a new proposition. He suggested that Bubbles should create a special edition beverage featuring Julian's name and likeness on the label. Julian jokingly proposed calling it a protein beverage, aimed at building muscle. Bubbles politely deflected the suggestion, offering a non-committal response. Julian pressed further, asking detailed questions about the financial health of the business. He inquired about sales volume, profit margins, and overall success. Bubbles immediately recognized the familiar pattern. He noted the sudden, intense interest Julian was showing in a venture that was actually generating revenue. Julian defensively claimed that he was merely looking out for Bubbles, wanting to ensure that his friend was not being taken advantage of by unscrupulous customers. Julian began using sophisticated business terminology, asking about company valuation and weekly margins. Bubbles, refusing to be intimidated, countered that he also watched educational television programs about investing and understood the complex vocabulary Julian was attempting to use against him. Seeing that his deceptive approach was failing, Julian finally dropped his confident facade. His shoulders slumped, and a look of profound defeat washed over his face. He confessed to Bubbles that he was entirely destitute. He had no money left. He explained that he was genuinely trying to build a legitimate life, but the transition was proving to be incredibly difficult. Julian shared a humiliating experience from the previous evening. He had invited a woman to his home to watch a film, but because he was completely bankrupt, the woman had to purchase the microwave popcorn herself. Julian expressed the deep shame he felt in that moment. Bubbles, offering a dose of practical advice, pointed out that if Julian was experiencing financial hardship, He should not be engaging in unnecessary entertainment expenses. Julian clarified that they had not gone out to a cinema. They were watching the film inside his own modest dwelling. He reiterated that he could not even afford the simplest of snacks. The situation was dire. Bubbles, feeling a wave of sympathy for his oldest friend, shook his head at the pathetic nature of the circumstance. Reaching into a nearby cooler, Bubbles pulled out a cold bottle of his crafted beverage and handed it to Julian, offering a small gesture of charity. Julian, initially resistant to accepting a handout, reluctantly took the bottle, his pride stinging but his thirst winning out. Their quiet moment was suddenly interrupted by the chaotic arrival of Richard. Richard burst into the shed, his face pale and his arm wrapped in a makeshift, heavily soiled bandage. He was cursing loudly, complaining about an uncooperative neighborhood feline. Julian immediately noticed the severe injury and asked Richard what kind of terrible incident had occurred. Richard, attempting to maintain a facade of control, launched into a defensive explanation about his romantic life. He explained that he had been courting a woman named Susan for the past 4 or 5 months. He described the relationship as wonderful, noting that he had forgotten how much he enjoyed sharing his life with a partner. He admitted that Susan could be difficult to manage at times, but he claimed their physical connection was extraordinarily passionate, so intense that he realized he needed to improve his physical fitness to keep up with her energy. Bubbles listened to Richard with a mixture of happiness and deep concern. A part of Bubbles was genuinely glad that Richard had found a companion. He believed that Richard needed a stabilizing romantic influence in his life. However, Bubbles harbored serious reservations about Susan. He confessed to himself that Susan frightened him significantly. He was deeply unsettled by the way she seemed to manipulate Richard's thoughts and actions without Richard ever realizing it, likening her influence to a sophisticated form of psychological control. Julian interrupted Richard's rambling about his relationship, demanding to know the truth about the gruesome injury on his arm. Richard, avoiding eye contact, fabricated a ridiculous story. He claimed that he, Corey, and Jacob had been participating in a recreational activity he called rollerblade skiing. He described a scenario where they were moving at high speed and unexpectedly encountered a large patch of rough gravel, resulting in a severe, collective fall. He claimed that Jacob had suffered the worst of the impact and lamented the very existence of gravel, stating it was detrimental to their invented sport. Julian, incredulous, questioned the entire premise of the story. He asked how they had even acquired the rollerblading equipment, immediately assuming they had stolen it. Richard vehemently denied the accusation of theft, stumbling over his words as he tried to invent a fictional retail store where they had supposedly purchased the items. The tense atmosphere was broken by the arrival of Trinity, Richard's daughter, and Jacob, her husband. Jacob was clutching his chest, his clothing torn. Trinity, her face flushed with anger and worry, demanded an explanation. She pointed to the small, metallic objects embedded in Jacob's clothing, asking her father what had truly happened the previous night. Richard, still clinging to his fabrication, insisted the objects were pieces of gravel from their alleged accident. Trinity, her voice trembling with disappointment, refused to accept the lie. She correctly identified the objects as remnants from a shotgun shell. She confronted her father, stating plainly that he had been involved in a shooting. She begged him to stop lying to her. Faced with the undeniable truth and the heartbreaking disappointment in his daughter's eyes, Richard finally collapsed under the weight of his own deceit. He lowered his head, a profound sense of shame washing over him. He addressed Trinity and his friends, offering a sincere and desperate apology. He confessed that he had been keeping a massive secret from everyone for the entire duration of the summer. He admitted that he had not been attending classes to upgrade his small engine repair certification, nor had he enrolled in the heavy machinery operation course as he had previously claimed. Instead, he had been secretly cultivating a large, illegal garden in the isolated woods near the edge of town. Trinity's reaction was a mixture of sorrow and